Okay, so now I'm going to go through all of the rack gear in this credenza back here, starting with bay number 1. Up top, we've got a Smart C1 stereo bus compressor. This is basically a copy of the famous SSL G series bus compressor. So it's an awesome compressor to use on your entire mix, really glue the whole thing together and tighten up the bottom end and give your record that finished sound. Below the Smart, we've got a 500 series rack chassis here. Obviously lots of room to grow, but right now we've got a pair of Electrodyne 501 mic preamps. Electrodyne was a console manufacturer, probably in the 60s, and they made some great consoles that folks like the Beach Boys used to use. So it's an amazing sounding mic preamp, very full. I love it. Down here is an Ampex 350. Now this came out of a tape machine, but it's been converted to be just a mic pre. Basically, this knob is the gain, and that's it. Tubes, transformers, super high headroom, great sound. This here is a Great River MP2NV. So this is Great River's kind of Neve 1073 mic pre kind of sound. I like it a lot because of the dual stage gain. You got the input and the output, so you can really crank it up and distort it if you want, and then turn the output down. It's also got this impedance switch, which, especially for ribbon mics, will brighten them up quite a bit. And the loading switch here, which has another subtle change to the sound. So that's cool. And then down at the bottom, we got a Mercury M72S. Mercury makes all kinds of great recreations of old vintage gear. This is their version of a Telefunken V72. Telefunkens the V72s were used in the old Abbey Road mixing decks. And they've got a great textured mid-range, and I don't know, something about this I love on bass too. So it gets used quite a bit. So moving on to the second bay here. Up top, we've got a Skibby Electronics 59C Red Stripe compressor. Bill Skibby owns a studio in Michigan called Key Club, and he also makes some really cool gear. This is his version of the famous LA2A compressor. Tube opto compressor, amazing on vocals and bass and lots of other stuff. This here is a Universal Audio 6176. This is really 2 units in one. On the left side, you've got a 610 tube mic pre with EQ. And on the right side, you've got a version of the famous 1176 compressor. They can be used together or used separately. Down here, we've got the Dynamite. This is a stereo compressor expander, limiter, gate. Does a lot of stuff all in one. Dynamites are these really aggressive, punchy compressors, so you can really make a kick drum cut through or a snare drum have a lot of snap to it. So pretty cool. And then you got the gate function, which can be handy too, of course. This is something made from a company in LA called Overstayer. They call it the Saturator, and it's basically a distortion box. So you can really dial in your sound of your distortion with this thing. And it's even got this resonant high-pass filter that you can totally make go out of control if you want. And it's got a blend knob on it, so you can be really subtle with it, or you can let it go all the way. So you can go anywhere from just subtle vocal warming up or completely smashing a drum kit with this. Pretty cool. These 2 units down here are from Orban. Orban would be, a company that you might see their gear in a broadcast studio in the 70s. But they're right at home here in the studio too. This is a stereo compressor and a stereo EQ. Very colorful, not for everything, but when called for, they're really cool. And at the bottom, we've got this old funky early digital reverb from Roland, the R880. It's funny how, a lot of early digital converters were terrible, but a lot of the early digital reverbs actually sounded quite nice, and this one included. I used it recently, and I can tell you there's really nothing digital sounding about it. And it's got this funny remote here, which looks quite clunky, and it is, but it gets the job done, and you might have a few chuckles when you use it. All right, moving along to bay number 3 here. Besides the trusty Furman voltage regulator that's providing clean power to all this gear, we've got a DBX 160X here. These are great on kick drum and all kinds of things, really. These two are Pultec reissues. For those that don't know, Pultecs are like basically these holy grail equalizers from back in the day. Tube amplifier stage, otherwise passive EQ system. They sound super sweet on, I don't hesitate to use these on anything. But recently this material scientist made it his business to kind of dig into the original components of the Pultecs and figure out what made them tick. And he, really did a good job. And these sound basically exactly what you would have gotten back in the day if you had bought a Pultec. So amazing equalizers, you really can't go wrong with them. Down here we've got an API 3124 Plus. This is basically 4 channels of API mic pre's. So API is an American classic brand that's still going super strong. Amazing on drums, vocals, all kinds of things. Below the API, we've got a Chameleon Labs 7602. Chameleon Labs are doing a great job of low-cost versions of classic gear, and this is their version of basically a Neve 1073 with the EQ, unlike the Great River. So a really versatile EQ here. I love this thing on snare drum, use it all the time. This is another DBX 160, but this is the original variant of the famous compressor. So people love this on kick and snare, bass. This is refurbished by Vintage King, so it's all working totally up to original specs. Next to the DBX is this LA3A compressor. This is kind of like that Skibby Red Stripe LA2A copy. This was Universal Audio's reissue of the LA3A. So it's similar to an LA2A, but it doesn't have tubes. So a little more of a solid state vibe. Sounds great though on similar things you would use for the LA2A. Below the LA3A is a Chandler Limited Germanium mic preamp. Really interesting modern mic preamp with variable feedback in the circuit, which is unusual. It changes the tone of the whole circuit. It also has this thick switch, which really boosts up the low end of the signal. I love this on electric guitar leads. And down at the bottom, we've got a set of 4 John Hardy M1 mic pre's. You can see we're actually using one right now. These are super clean, super linear, and the type of mic pre that classical guys would not hesitate to use. So we've got it all here at Rarefied, from super color to super clean. All right, moving on to bay number 4. We've got a Neve 33609 compressor here. This is an amazing compressor limiter. Love it on drums, but can be used as a tracking compressor too. I wouldn't hesitate to use it on a vocal or really anything. It's got that Neve thing. I don't know. I think it's the transformers in it or something like that. There's something about the mid-range character of this that I just love. This here is a reissue of a compressor that's known as the Compex. Kind of difficult to use, a lot of knobs here. There's an expander on it, and but this is another great bus compressor for drums, especially. And you just gotta spend a little bit of time to dial it in. Here you have the ubiquitous distressor, probably found in every modern studio now, and well, you can't really say a bad thing about it. It's super versatile. And you can go from super subtle to completely crushed. Down here, you've got the purple MC77. This is a particular variant of the famous 1176 compressor. It's got all the ratios, and it will also do the all-in setting. Super aggressive sounding. Love it on a rock vocal, snare drum, room mics. Really cool. Below that, we've got a spring reverb here from a company called Mic Mix. This is called the Master Room. It's cool because it's got EQ on each channel. Really cool sounds that come out of this thing. Love it. It's got the mono chamber drive option, or you can do stereo. And it's also got the mono chamber return option. It's kind of cool. This here is a radial workhorse power strip. It holds 3 different 500 series units from radial. In this case, it doesn't have to be radial, but I put in their phase Q tool here, which is a phase shifting box. And this is great for when you're recording a direct signal and a mic signal, like on a bass, for instance, and you want to make sure that they're phase lined. You can use this to do that. And these two units are called the Ecstasy, EXTC. These are designed to interface the pro audio world with like the guitar stomp box world. So let's say you want to use an effect on your mix or on some particular aspect of your mix, like a flanger, phaser, or whatever. You have the stomp box for it. You could use the digital plugin, but you could use that stomp box instead. Interface it with a couple cables here. You can control how much signal you send to the stomp box, how much you get back from it. Makes it super handy to integrate those types of tools into your setup. And this here is another spring reverb. This is the Fisher Space Expander. Really old, funky, a little bit noisy, but super unique sounding reverb. You would find these back in the day built into Hammond organs. And that famous dub engineer is known to have used these on his dub mixes, King Tubby. Down at the bottom, we've got another spring reverb. This is made by Demeter. It's called the Real Reverb. It's not as quite as sophisticated as the Master Room, but it has a great tone to it and more almost plate-like, I'd say. And it doesn't really do the boing thing, but it sounds really clean and beautiful. All right, moving on to bay number 5 here. This is where we've got our converters. So we've got the Burl B2 Bomber ADC here. This is 2 channels of analog to digital conversion. It's just in complement to the set of Apogees here, but the Burl's great. You can track to this to Pro Tools, or I use it personally to capture the mix off the board. And it's just a different flavor of conversion. The Burl is made with an analog front end, probably more similar with what you would see in a tape machine with transformers and discrete components and stuff. So a little bit of a beefier low end to it and a little more kind of rounded out on the highs. But, sounds great. And the Apogees sound great too. We got 32 in and out here, so really more than you would ever need. And you got the soft limit feature, which gives it that sort of rounding at the top end, just like tape might do. So, Apogee is basically classic at this point. And at the bottom here, this is the head unit for our headphone system, the Hearback. So this thing will digitize 8 different signals that you can send to this little remote box that the musician can use to dial in their own mix. All right, over here we've got a 500 series chassis in the desk, and first up is this Maris Auto Bit. This is a pretty unique 500 series unit. It's actually a bit crusher, so it can really give you all kinds of weird 8-bit sounds and video game sounds and chiptune kind of stuff. And it's got a ring mod on it, and it's pretty cool. This guy right here is the Duressor from Empirical Labs, so same company that makes the Distressor. It is a de-esser, as the name might imply, and you can of course use a plugin to do that, but it's nice sometimes just to make it sound good from the get-go when you have S problems. Over here we've got these 2 spec EQs. They kind of look like they might be SSL style EQs, but I think they're more of just a straight clean EQ, so when you like what you're getting out of your signal and you want to just kind of fix something or do a little adjustment, but you don't want the tone to change at all, these would be a good one to reach for. These are the standard audio level ores. They are basically like the Shure Level Lock, which was this crazy compressor that tried to make everything the same level. They also add in this crunch mode, which is more of just a distortion. So these are really fun to use on drums and stuff because they really smash the hell out of things. This is a envelope from Alesia, and it's similar to the SPL Transient Designer, but it gives you a little more control over how that works. So you have this attack and sustain capabilities here, so you can boost the attack or sustain of an instrument or cut them. But the frequency knob lets you dial that in a little bit more as terms of what frequency you start to have that attack control happen at, or sustain control. And there's actually even a mode on this where this whole thing just becomes an equalizer, which is just a kind of added bonus. This is the Little Labs VOG, which stands for Voice of God, and it's an interesting bass resonance tool. So what it does is it kind of boosts your low frequencies in a certain area and then does a big cut of everything below it. So it's really great for when you're trying to get your bass to sit in the mix right. And it's really cool on kick drum if you want to like make something sound more like an 808 or something like that. And of course you could try it on a vocal and get a real kind of beefy low vocal. And then finally we've got this Moog 500 series analog delay. So awesome delay from Moog, Moog's amazing. But what's really cool about this is actually the MIDI port on it, which there's a plugin that you open in your DAW, and you can actually control all these parameters, as well as ones that don't show up on the front panel, like the LFO, and you can sync things to the timing of your session, and it's really opens up like all kinds of crazy possibilities. So that's those. All right, we've got one more 500 series chassis here to go through. This is the Shadow Hills Mono Gamma mic preamp. It's a really cool modern mic preamp with a fairly unique transformer option here. You've got the nickel transformer or the steel transformer, also an option with no transformer. So you can dial in some different sounds. The nickel's like really beefy, and the steel is like brighter, cuts through the mix a bit more. So pretty cool mic pre. These two guys are the Animod AM660s. These are fairly unique. So these go after the sound of the famous Fairchild compressor. But the Fairchild is like this huge compressor, and it costs way too much money to buy. And, it's ridiculous that they're able to like achieve a similar sound in the 500 series. And the way they did it is similar to what all the plug-in guys do when they're emulating vintage gear. They kind of model the behavior of the circuits. And then instead of doing it in DSP, what Animod did is they did it with other analog circuits that are just not as big as the tubes and transformers that you normally would have in an actual Fairchild. So in 500 series, they managed to sort of achieve a similar sound. I love these on bass, vocals, acoustic guitar, or potentially on the entire mix. I've used it on slower songs. So over here we've got the Helios Type 69 mic pre and EQ. Helios was another one of these old console manufacturers, famously used at Olympic Studios. So yeah, this would be a mic pre that would have been used by the Stones, Hendrix, classic sound, really cool EQ. Love it. And finally, for the 500 series stuff, at least, we've got the Chandler Limited TG2. This is another mic pre. This one is modeled after a particular mic pre that would have been found at Abbey Road Studios, so used by the Beatles and so forth. But I love this on electric guitar. It's got a really creamy sound to it. And besides that, over here we've got this Yamaha analog delay. This is the E1010. Pretty cool unit. It's got a little EQ on it. Different push buttons here to get the different delay times, as well as this knob and the feedback mix knob, and this really cool frequency modulation feature, which lets you go off into some really strange territory. All right, before we leave the control room, I just wanted to show you guys a couple tube direct boxes that we have at the studio that are really cool. This is the A Designs Ready. So it's a very simple unit, just got the one volume knob. Sounds great though. This one here is the Tonecraft 363. Tonecraft is actually a local company to San Diego. This one's great. It's got input and output gain, so you can really drive it hard, get a little distortion if you want. And then it's also got a Baxendale EQ, just great bass and treble EQ. Super simple, but super effective. I also like that it has two outputs, two individual outputs. So you know, when I track bass, I like to record the bass and then a compressed version of the bass, so that makes it really easy to do. These are great on synths too, of course. With the Tonecraft, you can use their little boost mate with it if you want, and that actually allows you to use this as a mic preamp. And I've done it before for a kick drum and for a vocal, and it actually sounds really, really good. So 2 great tube DI options at the studio.